Welcome everyone to another episode of the Alex Mo podcast. And tonight we have Dr. Tanya Miller and Sherry Teague, representative of PT Proud. We at the Alex Mo full transparency podcast. So whatever you hear or whatever you see on tonight's podcast will be full transparency. If you're offended, hey, what? Sorry.
It is what it is. I mean, we've always been true to ourselves, Mo, that our platform is for people to feel comfortable to say what they want to say and how they want to say it. We don't owe anything to anybody. We are very comfortable in our own skin and how we go about handling ourselves and doing business. So the people we have on our show should feel the same.
Well, we appreciate the opportunity.
So PT Proud, tell us about it for those who don't know, because not everybody belongs in the APTA, is an APTA member. How did PT Proud come about, and what and who does it represent?
So PT Proud was the brainchild of students. So I just want to put a plug in there for PT students. You know, when PT students say, well, I'm not in the profession yet, what can I do? I go back to PT Proud because PT Proud is here because of students. Mm-hmm. So some students of Mel Hoffman, Dr. Mel Hoffman, and Carla Bell, they started PT Proud, and because it needed representation of members that were not students, that's how Mel and Carla got started with it. And it really started as a catalyst group in the Academy of Leadership and Innovation. At that time it was HPA. And it worked as a catalyst group for a while. And then they realized that there was a lot of interest in understanding more about our communities and support. And it kept getting more and more members, a lot of students, again, way to go students. So they decided to make it a committee and give it some funding so we could do some things with it. And the last year we worked to upgrade our bylaws and to really formalize elections. And we are now a special interest group under the Academy of Leadership and Innovation. So it's really grown, but it's because of students, which I just think is really an awesome, cool thing. And I actually only got involved with it when it was a committee. I have interest in helping with bylaws and formation. So I helped them with getting to becoming a special interest group.
Man, that's awesome. I mean, these new crop of students and future therapists, hats off to them. I give it to them because
I was just going to say that, Mo.
Man, for years, even though
I was just worried about passing
I had to drink beer when I was even in school.
Yeah,
so
no, I mean,
come out and form a group.
I feel like we've got a huge crowd of very determined young therapists, new therapists, whatever you want to call them, because we're getting a ton of momentum, obviously with the PT Proud. You've got a lot coming out of school and doing their own thing and starting their own practices and elevating the profession as a whole, I feel, to try to get to this new level. So yeah, kudos to all those new members of our profession. You guys are definitely pulling your weight and kind of carrying a bunch of other people to raise their standards as well.
I think they're frustrated, mm-hmm. and they don't like where the profession is going with reimbursement and how they have salaries and also who they recognize and who they advocate for. And they're standing up, and I love it. Mm-hmm. What we need.
Absolutely.
They don't see themselves being reflected back at them. And that's super important for this next generation, that they feel that sense of inclusivity, that they can see themselves being in those higher level positions. And I think that, I remember the first meeting. I remember that it was sort of a PT Proud's meeting in this room. It was a whisper that was going around, and everybody wasn't quite so out at that time. And this was 2019, 2018. It was pre-pandemic.
Yeah, I think it's sooner than that. I think it's been a few years, 2 years or so before that.
And they had them in a room that was kind of, how that goes with those little meetings that you set up outside of the rooms at CSM. And they had it in a room that was sort of tucked away, and you had to ask to find it. And when you finally got there, but when you opened the door, it was like opening the door with, the rainbows coming out at you. It was packed to the gills. Everybody was standing against the wall, sitting on the floor. I mean, it just was, and it was a decent sized room. And the students, you were there, Mo. I think we actually walked over there together, and the students were presenting it, and it was just the neatest thing. You could tell from the energy in that room that it was going to become something.
Most definitely. I don't know. It as you said, a lot of us try to hide it or not be open about it. So it was definitely refreshing, and it gave me courage to be like, you know what, screw it, just be you.
That's right.
So
That's right.
Hats off to them.
They're still around. Some of them are in committee lead positions now, so they're still doing the hard work.
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad. But so do you feel that now that it is under you said which academy it's under now?
Academy of Leadership and Innovation, which is the old HPA.
Okay. Was it strategic that you guys went under that specific academy and no one else?
Yeah, I think it was, because for the academy, first of all, it's Academy of Leadership, and where do we need to be but in leadership? And it also is that academy that really deals with policy and guiding what's going on. And unfortunately, a good amount of time that we spend as PT Proud is advocating and fighting, because there are so many changes happening right now on a state level that is impacting our community and impacting how we care for patients, and not enough is being done. And so we find ourselves spending all of our time advocating and fighting and looking at these laws and talking about what needs to be done and where do we go next.
Speaking about state laws, I know both Alex and Sherry are in Florida. Good Lord.
It's okay, I'm calling in from Texas.
And you are currently in Texas, but you don't live there. Those are two of the major states that we host conferences, but they have some really bizarre bans on certain things. So it affects the population that we treat. It affects clinicians who are treating and who are gay. So how can PT Proud help with advocating for clinicians and patients when it's just part of an academy, but not really the APTA itself putting out a statement?
So
let me start, Tanya, and okay. You'll clean it up, because I'll probably make trouble. Let's start with where those are being held. I think that it's been a longstanding tradition that CSM can only go certain places because of the size of the conference. It has to have a certain amount of housing. It has to have a certain size of venue. And when all these things started happening, probably during the pandemic, or right before the pandemic, when all these rules started getting a little bit more fundamentalist, and not to offend anybody, but just became very, very much more strict. There was already conversations going on between PT Proud and the mothership, the APTA, about those locations. I think I saw a lot of chatter and a lot of conversation and a lot of hand-wringing over the World PT Conference being in Dubai. And this just happened in the last week because of their human rights stances. Well, the same thing goes for if those conferences are going to be held in Texas or Florida or any of the states that have the draconian laws, not just with the LGBTQIA, but also some of the other laws that are pretty draconian about when they can or cannot receive certain types of care at certain frame points in their life. We've never been met. We've never had a real substantive conversation that could affect change. And it's sort of just like, oh, well, we can't change it. Stop. And you get talk to the hand. There's not any movement towards that. And it's very frustrating. It's very frustrating. In fact, I personally did not attend CSM last year because it was in San Antonio. No, thank you. Or no, the year before last when it was in San Antonio. No, thank you. It was in San Diego this past time, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it hailed.
And it hailed. But yeah, it's one of those things where you have to. There were people making personal stances, but it's not moving the needle at the mothership, and that's very frustrating for us as it is for a lot of members.
Now, as far as Florida, because from what I remember, CSM was supposed to be in Orlando the year that COVID hit, right? And then I don't think that it was ever at least scheduled to be in Florida again anytime soon, because when I've looked, it just hasn't been there. Was that at all related to any of that, or that was just
I think because
they schedule them out so many years. They schedule them out years in advance.
Yeah. And I think the pandemic was considered an act of God, so they probably got all their money back from the venues that they had already made reservations. That's one of those things like a natural disaster or something like that. I think that they were able to not have to promise to come back within a certain number of years afterwards. But no, I mean, do we think, and Tanya, you can answer for yourself, but do I think that they would schedule in Florida tomorrow if they had the opportunity and it came along? Yeah, I think they absolutely would.
So to kind of build on what you're talking about, Sherry, and this is beyond the conferencing, but just statements from APTA and support of our community from APTA. And this is Tanya speaking, not as a representative of PT Proud, because I'll probably get myself in trouble. But, I've been a member from the APTA since 1980 something or 1990 when I was a PT student. And I've always been supportive of the organization and love the organization. But I think that they don't have their way right now with how to support us. They want to support us, but when it comes down to it, I think they're afraid to make a bold statement and to be out there and supporting PT Proud and supporting our communities because they have a lot of members that would give pushback to that. Mm-hmm. And because of that, when you see statements coming out, it'll say PT Proud makes this statement, not APTA, PT Proud. Mm-hmm. And we had a conversation about a statement we put out in response to transgender care, and it was from PT Proud. It was not from APTA. And I think that that's, from me personally, is one of my frustrations, that we just haven't found our voice as an association, and I don't know why we can't. If you look at the AMA, they found their voice. They'll come out in support of transgender care. They're very clear about gender-affirming care. And supportive of our community. So I just don't think we found our way yet.
Mm-hmm. Well, to be quite honest with you, I think money talks. It's such as life that if you have to choose who you offend, you tend to pick the group that's not marginalized. And unfortunately, those who belong in the PT Proud community are considered a marginalized group. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be like, hey, you guys could get over it. But the ones who aren't are the ones who are more outspoken. And if they choose to make an individual stance, like, Sherry did, not showing up to CSM, but pull their company's sponsorship out of a conference or stop paying dues for their employees, that has a huge financial impact on the organization. So I think a lot of it, speaking from this position as a business owner, has to do with money. Sure. And offending the least amount of people. So,
no. Go ahead, Alex.
I was just going to say, I think the APTA has been consistent in the fact, and not necessarily a good thing, but they have been consistent in the fact that they just don't speak out on any matters, right? Like whether it's the Proud stuff, it's the gun reform, abortion, because they've had opportunities, right? And all of these social issues impact our patients in one form or another, whether it's the gun reform stuff or the abortion stuff with women's health, right? But they've never made a statement. But like you said, Tanya, the AMA, anytime, when we've had the moments of the gun stuff being at the forefront, they said something. When it was the, Roe versus Wade and the abortion stuff was at the forefront, they once again came out and said something. Whereas the APTA has always just kind of said, we're going to hold back here and kind of toe the line as to how we can kind of navigate this and not really say anything, but, whatever the case may be.
They actually did make an official statement pretty boldly about gun control. They did make a statement about that, and they made it from the APTA that they supported reasonable gun control that could decrease the amount of injuries or something like that. I don't have it right in front of me, but they were pretty firm on that.
Okay, so I stand corrected.
No, and that's okay, because the other things like Roe v. Wade and like LGBTQ or QIA, they don't take a stance on that stuff. But I'm going to kind of go back to what Mo said. It is about money for their members. What we're talking about affects patients and patient care and the access to care. That is way larger than a body of 100,000. That's millions of people, potentially, right? Hundreds of thousands of people that are going to have limited care, be it women's health, be it transitional care for transgender individuals. The things that are happening at the state legislatures are not about our profession. They're about our patients being able to receive care, and whether our professions could be under some sort of criminal liability by providing that care. So it's one of those things where you go, wait a minute, aren't we supposed to treat patients, all of them? Isn't that in our ethics and our bylaws? That's my concern, is that, yeah, okay, you want to keep your 100,000 plus members, fine. Okay, got it. So-and-so writes a big check, got it. But what about that rural patient with CP who has two moms that nobody will go to the house because they're afraid they'll get arrested?
Mm-hmm. Well, and one of our core values of the APTA is social responsibility. So how are we aligning with that core value? And our vision is to transform society. How are we aligning with that vision if we are not willing to put our neck out? You can't transform anything by sitting back and saying, well, I'll be quiet and I'll wait and I'll sit at the sideline. You can't transform things that you have to be out in front. So I don't see our actions aligning with our vision.
Very valid point. Now, with regards to the AMA, there's power in numbers. They are well supported. They have money.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're in a position like that, you're not afraid of being canceled. Right. Because you're going to keep growing. And I think that's the challenge with our profession and organization. It's very shaky. Not many people are staying as members. So it has been a challenge to grow the APTA. But I don't know what we can do individually. I know if I see a group like PT Proud wanting to make changes and representing my concerns and my needs, I would gladly join and be part of that. So maybe they allow groups like PT Proud and others that represent individual values for people to show representation. Mm-hmm. That's just a thought.
And the nice thing is that since PT Proud, there's other sections that other academies that have PT Proud like groups. And I know sports does. Pretty sure PEDS does. Tanya, do you know of any other?
Well, and there's state chapters that do too. So that's been a great, and we've seen this the way the APTA is structured with its sections. A lot of the work starts grassroots through the sections and through the chapters. And you are starting to see that rumbling where the PEDS section is, I'm sorry, I don't know if it's the Academy of Pediatrics. It probably is now. But the Academy of Pediatrics is, focusing on athletes and transgender children and how do you best support them and protect them, and sports medicine is getting involved. So the more that we can build from that grassroots and put that pressure up, I think is the way we have to do it, and we have to continue to do it. And we need our students to willingly stay involved in APTA and make that change, because I think that next generation is really going to force the change and require it.
Yep.
In any shape, realm of possibility, do you think that something like that can happen without the APTA? And the reason I ask is because, in my opinion, and I'm not an APTA member, haven't been an APTA member probably for at least 10 years or so.
The last time was on Anaheim, right?
Yeah, that was the actual last year that I was an APTA member. I don't feel that they've found quite the way to show a value that can apply across the board to most clinicians, right? So they don't see the value, so therefore they're not going to join. You know, you take random PTs, and I'll use Facebook, but Facebook is a whole nother dimension. But the one thing that people tie APTA membership to, right or wrong, is reimbursement, right? So if reimbursement is low, it's APTA's fault. And so because it's the APTA's fault, like, I'm not joining, right? They can't get my reimbursement rates, which therefore means I can't get a higher paycheck. So they're worthless. So how is this possible to do or accomplish without them? Because right now, the APTA membership numbers aren't there, at least from what I can see. And I don't look at that information or even really know. I'm just making an assumption. But I feel like this would almost have to be able to happen without the APTA, because they're not willing to meet halfway as of right now, and they don't have the funding or the numbers to be able to push it. Does that make sense?
No, you're right. You're right. And then there's been some hiccups along the way. I think that, not getting the direct access through the doctoring, and Tanya, I'm going to ping you a little bit, but not getting that direct access as a frontline provider with getting the doctorate was a big hit, right? Not having insurances accept that as a first stop of care was a big hit to the profession. And I think that they're still battling with that, because it was the increase in the tuition, it was the increase in the time, all of the dedication, and then I come out with a DPT, and now what, right? You're being supervised by people who don't have a DPT. You're basically a very fancy doctor, but you're not able to bill directly for Medicare. Most major insurances don't take you. All those things that needed to happen that we were kind of all relying on the APTA to somehow do never occurred, and it hasn't occurred to date. And with the way things are going in Medicare being the largest payer in the country, it doesn't appear that it's going to. And I think, Alex, what you're saying is right. It may have to occur outside of that organization. And Tanya can talk a little bit more about the DPT thing, but it's one of those things where it's such a necessary profession. You hope people can organize, but right now the only thing we have is APTA. So organizing within it, through the academy level, and working your way up and being in the House of Delegates and all the things that you're involved with, Mo, is important. You have to be willing to stand at the microphone and make your point, and keep beating it and keep kicking and keep swimming, if you will, and until something actually gets done.
Well, and I think too, partnering with other organizations, like I know I just sent over to Sherry, there's the LGBTQ, group within the AMA. I keep going back to the AMA because they've done such a nice job, but, partnering with those organizations and not riding their coattails, but using the strength of that organization and what they're doing to help to make change and to connect, I think is another way for us to move things forward for our profession, and maybe kind of pull our association along, because we're working in collaboration with others. So one of my goals is to reach out to them and say, okay, how do we work together? How do we join forces? We all care about our patients. When this comes right down to it, yes, our profession is important, but we care about our patients. Our patients don't have access to care, care that they need and they deserve. And, there is already a significant reduction in members of our communities seeking care because they are afraid to seek care. And then we do these laws that are coming out just makes people seek even less care. So we know if we're going to address chronic illness, and we know we're going to change things within our nation, we need to have everybody feel comfortable accessing care.
The collaboration piece is very important. So I'm glad to hear that you are looking and collaborating with the AMA and others. I think one thing that is essential is for us to do strategic partnerships. So whether it's AMA, speech, OT, whatever, I think as a community, we can affect change. So let's try to do it. Um, I know like a lot of companies say they do diversity, equity, inclusion stuff. They get the paperwork involved. You might be working in a company, belonging in a company, and you have no idea because you don't see it. So everything seems to be of like face value. So being part of leadership in PT Proud, you've probably made recommendations. I know I've been to a couple webinars and talks about adjusting like demographics and all that stuff, even like the bathroom stuff. I see some bathrooms. I was at a conference today, well, over the weekend, it ended today, where you saw a unisex bathroom, but you still saw like the men, women stuff separate. But on the registration stuff, male, female, non-gender, non-binary. So, I mean, some places don't have it. So even within the PT profession, when you go to register as a patient, some of those changes have not been done. But change should start with us. How can PT Proud encourage private practice clinics, hospitals, and others to be mindful of these small things that will make patients feel included or even want to seek care?
It's a constant refrain, right? We started talking about that back in PT After Dark that first year, Monique. That was a subject that came up on that panel that we did, and I think we actually have sent formal letters of request and attended meetings and done different things at the APTA level to get some of the demographics on the website changed. That's something that is a front of mind issue for PT Proud and the other section organizations as well.
Yeah, and I think it's multi. I don't think it's just one thing that we can do. It's multifactorial. We have to, involved with again with Mel Hoffman and Carlin, the research that they're doing, looking at our communities and physical therapy. They've been doing it from a patient's perspective, from a faculty perspective, from a student perspective. So understanding and publishing research and getting that literature out there, I think, is one thing that's important. Obviously, literature comes out slowly, so that's a slow moving impact, but also making employers aware and making the clinicians aware and asking for it, because that's the other thing is people don't even realize what they need to ask for and how are they able to make their patients feel more included. Clinicians don't know that their patients might not feel comfortable because the consent forms weren't worded correctly and they didn't have the right pronouns on the consent form, or they used the wrong name for somebody, and clinicians don't even know what to ask. I think people are confused. And so I think it starts with, getting at that level too. So getting the literature out there, getting the support out there, helping the frontline clinician. There's so many different areas that we have to keep working towards to make those changes.
I think brave space training is always a good thing too. I mean, that's something that PT Proud has done as pre-con education for the last few years. And that's teaching clinics and teaching individuals how they can make themselves more accepting and what the steps are. Do this, then do this, then do that. And I've seen people really have interesting changes in that training. When I went through it myself, just for my own edification, there was a gentleman there who was actually just put in a position at one of the New York downtown hospitals on the gender reassignment floor. He was the physical therapist. And he felt completely out of his depth. And so he came to the Brave Space training to learn, and he left in tears. And just the light bulb. And here was a guy that was already accepting and already accepted the position that was going to help a lot of people. When he got educated and realized what it was that was happening and how it had historically happened, he was overcome. And he was like, I didn't know that this was this way. And it's like, yeah. And so, getting more people, not just members of our community, but members outside of our community, to get into those Brave Space trainings and learn as much as they possibly can is a game changer.
Is that something that is only done as a pre-con, or does that happen throughout the year?
It's historically only been a pre-con, right, T?
Yeah, it's only been a pre-con, and actually, unfortunately, last year we didn't have enough people sign up, so we did cancel it. But we have talked about how do we do it throughout the year, and how do we make it, as everybody kind of knows, the LAMP leadership training. We make it like LAMP.
Jimmy has PT Pancas has been encouraging those who have had rejection for their CSM submission to actually use Twitter or podcasts to talk about stuff. So
that might be something we talked about doing some Twitter live events and some things that are going on. I do the social media and the public relations for PT Proud. That's my role. And we have to do some of that stuff. And if I can for just a minute, if you are a member of HPA or the Academy of Leadership and Innovation and you want to become part of PT Proud, please go to the PT Proud link and sign up. We're looking for people to fill really integral positions. So that was my little PSA.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that would be something that could potentially reach a lot more people in more of an informal setting, right? So I guess kind of safe in a way, right? Because you can kind of do it, in your own space or however you want to do it, but still able to get that information, which is ultimately the most important aspect, right? It's getting that information out to clinicians, like you said, in and out of the community, so that you can start to make those changes in your day-to-day life. Because ultimately, you guys at PT Proud can be doing all this great stuff, which you are, but if we don't take it to our practice, to our community, and start to implement it there, then it's really hard to make that meaningful change that we're trying to get for our patients. Because as we've mentioned here before, like ultimately that is the most important thing. The profession is what the profession is, and yes, we want all these great things to happen for the profession, but our patients need to get the care, and what they, where they belong, where they live, how they identify should not be a stop sign, so to speak, as to why they can't get what they need or feel comfortable in getting that. So, whatever we can do as clinicians to help them feel more comfortable, I think would go a long way.
And if I can just for a second, a lot of people wait until it becomes an emergency before they act on something. Like, you have a small repair in your house, you go, yeah, until the pipe completely bursts, and then you got to take care of it, right? So if people are waiting for that point of impact, we're past that point of impact right now. I have to tell people, the red light is flashing, the alarms are going off, the things that are happening at the state level, and I live in Florida, and so does Alex, and we can speak to directly some of the legislation that has happened in the last 6 months in Florida. And I actually received my healthcare at the University of Florida healthcare clinics that are in different cities in Florida. And they actually led on DEI for years. They had their awards from, GLAAD and Trevor Project and everything, and they displayed them all over the place. Their intake forms had all the right language. They made a point of asking the right questions. They do not anymore because they're funded by the state because Florida is a state school. When those laws went into effect, the draconian laws of saying no more DEI programs in state colleges, counting the number of transgender individuals in the colleges that are receiving care, all those kinds of things, it made a ground level impact where all that DEI incentives that happened prior to that legislation are literally gone. And all the effort that was happening at the colleges, at the state colleges, is gone. And so, we're past the time of action. We have to get involved. We have to get activated, and we have to make change. We have to at least, get our claws in the ground and hold on because, the storm's still raging. We just have to be able to survive it and move forward from there. And I don't mean to sound like a doomsdayer, but that's just where we are. And so we spend a lot of our time trying to digest the legislation that's going on all over the country and trying to see which is the biggest fire, as far as where we're going to put our efforts. And that's a very difficult thing. But I have to tell you, the leadership that we have, Tanya and Mel and previously Carla and everybody that's been fighting this fight, we're not tired. We're not done. So, I mean, I hope that we can get people excited about coming and joining us. It's not all bad. I mean, it is Pride Month after all. Let's smile.
Happy Pride.
Happy Pride.
Pride celebrations have gone on regardless.
That's right. We're dancing regardless, and we're dancing and we're singing and we're dressing and in all the crazy colors. I just went to Pride this last Saturday. It was awesome.
I read that here. Well, in St. Petersburg, they had like one of the higher attendances that they've had in quite a while. And from what I know about St. Pete, it's always been kind of a leader in the community in bringing people from all over the country,
right,
to celebrate and to do that stuff. So it's
our local pride was threatened up to the last minute. There was a gentleman who was part of a right-wing coalition, and he went to our city council, and because our pride is held in the local park where there's playground equipment, he thought that was inappropriate for children. And so he actually had our city council redo a vote. They had brought it before him again, and it was unanimous for us to keep pride because we've done everything permit-wise. The person who leads our pride is amazing. Everything was correct permit-wise. We agreed that we would not have a children's area, which has always historically been at the pride events, because here's a sneak preview. Gay people have children. Imagine. It's shocking, I know. But there was a place where they could hang out and draw and do play with balloons, do whatever. But we had to agree to not have a children's area this year as part of the agreement.
But again, see that chipping away, that's what's really scary, and what we have to, and plus the statement that makes, not to agree, but why can't we have a children's area? What is that saying? And kind of that pushing, going backwards, and I know that several of the advocacy groups have come out and said that putting out travel advisories for safety for members of our communities into Florida. So we literally have safety travel advisories for our own country right now.
The NAACP, Human Rights Campaign, and Equality Florida put out those warnings for Florida.
Yes, I got that. I got that one from the NAACP, and of course, a very popular conservative speaker said, "I'm sure you guys in Florida would not be missing any tips from us." So,
I did remember reading something like that.
Oh, good.
I want to ask you though, like, clearly there's, for lack of a better word, and I want to be sensitive here because there has been tragic stuff that's happened, but there's clearly attacks from the outside, right? Like all these different movements and things that are attacking the community. What, if any, are there from within? Like, do you feel like there's anything inside the community that is maybe hindering the progress? I asked that, like, honestly, not knowing.
No, I think it's a great question.
And I think that's a great question, because unfortunately, within any community, there's always strife between groups. And individuals not understanding others. And I see it in our own communities. I have a large lesbian community in a beach area in Delaware that we go to on a regular basis. And, talking to my friends there who don't interact and have the opportunity to engage with individuals who are transgender, and they don't understand the transgender community as well. And, just having, again, it comes down to education and having people know somebody in their lives and being impacted by that person personally. So like being able to sit down and have that honest conversation with somebody and say, let me tell you what I know from my experience and the friends and colleagues that I have had in my life. So being able to have those conversations, and you're right, there's there's barriers there because, oh, well, you know, we have our rights and everything. So why do I have to worry about supporting the transgender community? You know, it's them over there that are being attacked, not myself personally. So really getting people to understand how we have to be there for each other and build up our communities, I think is really important.
I was so happy when the flag was changed and it included all the colors, but also black and brown, which I thought was just fantastic. I think it's super important that any marginalized community has their arms linked with the other marginalized communities to hold a firm wall. I think that without doing that, then they're going to, you know, take whatever advantage they can. And, you know, we have to remember, and I have to tell myself this pretty frequently, because Tanya and I both are consumers of the news. I'll put it that way. It's the best way to say it. And one of the things that we have to remind myself of consistently is that 35% of the population just absolutely hates our guts. They hate the guts of anybody on this call right now. They really do. But that's only 3 to 4 out of 10. You know, there's still that other 6.5, that other 65% that want to be inclusive. You know, if you look at some of the Roe v. Wade legislation, it's over 75%. If you look at the LGBTQIA, DEI stuff, it's high. The numbers are high. The approval ratings of everybody being inclusive is in the 70s and 80s. But that's not what we see quite commonly, because that minority is extremely agile. They're extremely focused, and they have a mission. They're all following that one line of conversation, and they've all gotten in line behind that. So they appear to be much larger than 35%. Whereas on the 65%, we're like, oh yeah, come on, come to the party. Oh, I like you too. You like me. It's just all over the place. Everybody can come to the party, but what we're doing is we're partying. You know, we're not organizing. We're not getting ourselves ready for battle. And I think that that's been a disadvantage over the years. And so I love the younger generation, the millennials and the Gen Zs. They're going to make the difference. I just so enthralled about what happened in Wisconsin. The voter turnout up there to get that judge in place recently was amazing. So we have to become better organized on our side, and you know, just do what you do if you were in a playground and you had 6 of your buddies against 3 others. You know, I mean, that's not really even a fair fight, right? So just if we can't sit on that laurel, though. We have to organize that laurel and fight back against it every time we're confronted with it. It's super, super important. You know, you can't be quiet. You have to stand up and say, no, you know, that's not right. This is what we're going to do. Everybody's welcome here. So.
It's interesting that you'd say that the 30 to 35%, they move in unison, and you're right. I happen to be Black. I also happen to be gay, but there are Blacks who aren't gay who probably feel that the gay community move in unison and tend to have more support or advancement of stuff in certain professions and in society. So when you hear that pushback, what would you say?
I'm gonna let Tanya handle that one. She's probably a little bit more politically correct than me.
Well, I think you're right. I mean, I think that we, again, unfortunately, sometimes groups that are experiencing discrimination and marginalization, instead of bonding together, push back against each other, you know, and it doesn't do any of us any good. And just think if we all actually sat down and said, listen, we need to move forward as a group, and how can we move things forward that helps all of us and supports all of us. I don't have the answer, but it's important. We need to do it. I don't know what the answer is.
It definitely is important. But all right, so let me put something. I mean, I guess because of my build and how I dress, it's obvious. But if I were to dress otherwise, the first thing that people are going to recognize from me if I go into a house to provide service is that I'm Black. So the needs of a Black person to advance in our profession is different could be different from what it is of a gay person, and especially if it's a Caucasian gay person or if it's a Hispanic gay person. So, yes, we are all marginalized, all four of us, Alex included. Yeah, even though you're a man, but you're Hispanic. But it's we have a different level
Sure.
of stuff. I mean, there's a racism, there's a sexism, whatever you want to call it. So it's like your friends who are lesbian versus how they feel about people who are transgender. It's similar. It's that similar dynamic. So to come to a middle ground, although it would work if we do, it's kind of a struggle. I don't know. We need to sit down at a table and talk, and hopefully, like DEI committees can do that. But
Well, and I think you make a great point because, that's one of the challenges of DEI committees is they, depending on who's in that DEI committee is the direction that committee takes, and it might not look at everybody's interest. And, what you were talking about is, good old intersectionality, which, I love. It's been beat up in the media and abused by the right, but intersectionality is, the intersection of our lived experiences. And you described it so elegantly about your identities and how they intersect and which identity takes precedent in certain circumstances. And we need to sit down at the table and understand each other's lived experiences and say, okay, how does this law or how does this impact? But that's sitting down at a table and having a communication together and then deciding to move forward and to push back against discrimination as a group. And that's hard to do. It's not an easy task. And, there are some days, especially when we're meeting at 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, with PT Proud, and we're looking at all this stuff. And I turn into a pumpkin, between 9 and 10. And I'm starting to fade and I'm like, I just can't do it anymore, but we have to keep doing it. We have to keep talking. We have to keep having conversations like this. And, having people see each other as people trying to move through life, and we need to be there for each other. And I know that might sound corny, but that's what we need to do.
And I have the luxury like you do in one way, Mo, that I could fem myself up. Potentially it would freak everybody out, but I could fem myself up and put on my, my closet clothes, if you will.
You can't fem yourself up. I've never seen that one, Sherry. I'm sorry.
Okay. But
there's a challenge. There's a challenge.
There's a challenge. Yep. Okay.
I'm not accepting.
Can we just go off script and talk about the Stitch Fix outfit you ordered?
Okay. So, but if we look at that, Mo, I have the luxury of taking that off and setting it outside of my car before I head into a house. You cannot take off the color of your skin before you head into a house. That to me is a challenge unto its own on top of the homosexuality thing. But we do have something in common, and that's being told we're less than, right? And that's being treated like we're less than. And I think that's the biggest thing is when you sit down at that table and you have that discussion across the many people that reside in that 65%, is what is the common thing that we want to have better? What is that common thing? Because we can disagree on 8 out of 10 things, but what are the 2 things that we feel like we can make a difference on? That's probably what our side doesn't do a good job at. The other side has a clear mission, man. They're heading towards some idealistic 50s. I'll just say it, Gilead, back in the, from Handmaid's Tale. That is what they want. And they know how to get there by just shaving off every other person, and make them all get into line. And that's a scary thing because it's a very well-trained, well thought out modus of attack that they have. And I think that we have to do better on our side to get that message out that, hey, I know we don't agree on everything, but we do agree that this needs to happen better. And that's the message that has to get out there somehow.
So I'm gonna put a happier note on this is that we do keep moving forward, and this isn't new. I heard a great piece on NPR this weekend, and they were talking about how history repeats itself, and they were talking specifically about gender, and they said it's always been a tactic to scare people. And it was in the early 1900s that they were screaming that we were moving into urban areas and into apartment buildings, and they were taking the masculinity out of men and making them feminine because they weren't going to garden anymore, and they were going to be stuck doing housework and women's work. So like this has been a scare tactic that's been used by radical groups over and over and over. The difference is that social media and the motion of information in our society is just so much faster that they can grow the rhetoric faster, but the rhetoric hasn't changed. It's the same levels of same discrimination. It's the same scare tactics, and we've overcome it over and over again. So that kind of gives me hope that we can keep overcoming it and keep pushing back, but we can't sit back and let it get the best of us. We have to keep pushing.
And everybody knows that we're way more fun than they are. I mean, let's just say that in open air.
They think the world's falling apart, you know?
Yeah.
That's when we're fun. We have hope.
Exactly.
Do you ever think that, so like to your point about how they have that mission, it's a very target focus, almost like, you know, ruthless, like we're going to get there no matter what.
Exactly.
Why is it that you don't think that the 65% can take that approach, or hasn't happened yet? Right? Because it seems pretty simplistic. Like we have a target and we're going to get to that target no matter what. Like we're all just moving forward, you know, either join us or get left behind, so to speak. But the 65 is kind of like, we
don't believe that we should pick that target.
Okay.
We think that everybody should pick the target they want to go to. That's the difference, fundamentally. I mean, fundamentally, I don't believe I should tell you, any of you, what you should or should not think, what you should or should not do, how you should or should not look. You can live your life as long as it doesn't hurt anybody else. Maybe that's our spot of commonality, right? You can live your life however you want to, and we're all going to be okay. The other one has used this fundamental thing that if we don't get everybody in line to this goal, everybody's going to die.
Why couldn't we get, because like what you just said for me is kind of like the motto of my household. And Mo has heard me say this before, is 4011, right? So that's the number to my house in the address. And this is what I tell my wife and my kids. I'm like, we focus on what's happening in here. We're not concerned with what's happening out there. Everybody's allowed to do what they want to do as long as we're good, right? If there's anything that challenges my wife and kids or me, now we got a problem.
Right.
But I'm not actively going to my neighbor's house or anybody else to say, I don't like that. I don't like that. You shouldn't do that, right? So why is it that the commonality can't be like, hey, let's just come together and live our lives, right? Because it almost seems like, you know, like you said, the other people are trying to tell you how to do. Like that is the message, right? They have chosen that we're going to tell you what we think and how you should go about doing it.
Right.
Couldn't the 65 come together and say, hey, our message is just do you, right? Like, is there a way to come around that simple message? Is do you, I'm going to be over here. Just leave me alone. I'll leave you alone type of thing, right? It's very simplistic. I know it's much more complicated.
No, okay. I get what you're saying. It's simplistic.
I get it.
And on the surface level, it's all good. But I think with the 35% that is sticking to their mission, they're grounded in principle. 65%?
A principle, not necessarily the principle. Yeah.
Well, a principle. They stick with it. It's a message. They stick on task because that's what they believe. They're rooted. And that's why I always say to people, I would rather have a conversation with somebody who is openly racist than somebody who smiles in my face, but turns around and be like, that, you know, whatever. But I think a lot of people that belong in that 65% are wishy-washy. And they would blow wherever the wind is going to take them that day and then change the next day.
I also
we
think
need
people aren't paying
we need
attention either.
oh, that's the other thing. Yeah.
I mean, I talk to, people around me, and yeah, I'm a huge consumer of the news, and I know what legislation is being changed in this state, and I know who's standing up, but I talk to the people around me and they're like, what are you talking about? Like, oh, I hate the news. The news is depressing. I don't watch it. So if you're, like, there's a good part of our country that, well, it just doesn't affect me. So I'm going to go stream my favorite, Netflix and not worry about any of it. I don't even know that there's an issue. Like,
I think it comes down to the type of leadership that we have. Right now, we have a very effective leader. He happens to have a stutter. So communication from him is not as smooth as we would like to see it. But he has gotten so much done. Messaging that out has been tough. But I'm going to say 3 words, and you guys are all going to know who I'm talking about. Yes, we can.
Obama.
Mm-hmm. During that 8-year period of time was probably the most coalesced the 65% ever was, because they had a leader who had an idea and a mission and a motto. I mean, a great motto. Yes, we can. We were all excited about it, right? So it's almost like we need to get somebody who is a professional publicist to get a hold of our current administration and somehow message out the successes that are going on. And it's super important that happen in the next year and a half, because right now there's like 30 people running from the other side. One's going on arraignment tomorrow. It couldn't be more of a mess, but yet that mission just keeps marching, doesn't it?
I just want to know, I have a presentation at the same time, and I'm just not sure what's going to be more interesting, my presentation or the arraignment. I'm just saying.
Well, it'll be covered on every news channel, so I'm sure you'll be able to absorb it in one form.
My presentation will not, so there you go.
So Alex, I have to ask you, as a fellow Floridian, and neither one of us are in that area of the state, over under 10 times more crazies at the courthouse than there was in New York.
You talking about for tomorrow?
Yeah.
Probably more. I mean,
you think it's going to be more?
Florida, as you know, it is a big state for him and for the Republican Party. Mm-hmm. A lot of it has been the amount of people that we've had move into the state.
Yep.
From other areas, and it's just a constant battle. So, in New York, I don't think you would, obviously New York is a much more liberal state. So yeah, you have the crazies, but not like
Florida.
Not like Florida,
Alex,
right?
They're gonna get us banned from YouTube calling them
crazies. well, listen, like I'm just repeating what was said. That is not my thing. Everybody here is allowed to believe and to think and do whatever they want. Like at the end, it still hasn't changed. Like 40-11, like you do whatever you're gonna do. We're gonna do what we're gonna do in my household, right? And whether I agree with you or not, or what side may fall on a subject. I mean, for me, it's like, I'm going to treat you like I expect you to treat me, regardless of what we agree on, what we don't agree on. Like Mo and I, on a very surface fun level, like we don't agree on some stuff and we kind of go back and forth. But at the end of the day, it's always rooted in respect. And I always pride myself that whoever I interact with, and a lot of the times we're just not going to agree for whatever it may be, but at the end of the day, you're a human being, right? And you deserve that respect. I will talk to people. I will listen to people. I invite that because it gives me an opportunity to learn, right? Because to sit here and think that I know it all or that my opinion is like, no, like it's an exchange. When it's done right, it's an exchange where hopefully the individuals involved can take something away and say, I never thought about that.
Right.
And it may not change anything after that, but at least that person stopped for a second and said, I've never looked at it that way, or I've never thought about it that. right? And I stay clear of politics. I stay clear of religion, even within my family, because we have various different opinions on matters, right? But at the end of the day, we're a family. We love each other, and we move forward as such. And for me, it's hopefully where I hope we can get. Tanya said it over, is we just got to love each other. We got to, very move forward in like it's always said, in love. And at this point, it's been used and overused and just taken the wrong way. But I feel like at the end of the day, that's what we need to do. And hopefully, I pray that one day we can get to a very basic level where we can do that, where we can just respect individuals as people, respect them for who they are, how they choose to do. And as long as they're not infringing, on me or pressing on me in some form or fashion, then, live your life, because you only get one. So
and don't fall victim to fear. I mean, that's what they weaponize. I mean, that they weaponize fear against the unknown, fear against the different. Fear is somebody once said it was false evidence against reality. Fear is lack of education, it's lack of knowledge. Like you said, walk away from a conversation with someone different from you with some new understanding, right? Come away with something positive in an interaction versus always having to come away with something negative. I love that thought, Alex.
Well, and to your point, fear is an emotion, right? And what do we know about thoughts and decisions made based off emotion, whether a good emotion or a bad emotion? Like, it's never a good thing to do, right? Like we hear a lot of people tell us, if you're angry, take a step away before you decide to do something. Even on something as simple as like Twitter, like if you're in a heated, debate or whatever, step away, because that emotion is going to carry you and it may not carry you in the right way. And the same thing can happen when you're on a high, like things are so good, like you're not thinking clearly. Right. So
now are you talking about my wife critiquing softball at this point?
No,
don't think on emotion.
He's actually doing my presentation on emotional intelligence tomorrow, so I'm just going to tap out and let Alex do it tomorrow.
There you go. So it's just that. Like, I think the objective is to invoke an emotion and then get people to do something off of that emotion, right? And again, whether it's a good emotion or a bad emotion, it's just generally not a good idea to make any kind of meaningful decisions based off of that.
Right. Pick your battles. I think it gives each and every single one of us an opportunity to leave a good mark or make a good first impression. Many times I've gone into certain areas, especially rural areas, where someone said, "Oh, I've never met an immigrant," or "I've never met a gay person." So the impression that you give to people matters. It can change their perspective on certain things.
Sure.
So we do have a chance to take one or two off of the 35%, depending on the approach. But it's an uphill battle. I think the toughest part will be convincing the other 65 to move in unison. So I really want to thank both of you for being on this episode tonight. I've gotten a lot more information on PT Proud, and I'll definitely Sherry, can you remind us what's the link to register? So you have to also be a member of the Academy.
You have to be a member of the Academy of Leadership and Innovation, and then on their website.
Oh man, that's another section I have to go pay for.
Yes. And if you contact.
Wait, I thought you were going to do that at CSM. You told me you were going to do that at CSM.
Well, Mo, you outed yourself out, Mo.
I'm already in private practice. I'm already in home health. I'm ready, Mo, still in Maryland.
You outed yourself out, Mo.
Okay, fine. I'm going to register.
Well, first, before you come to PT Proud, though, check with your sections that you're currently a member of and see if they have a PT Proud type committee, because you may be able to go ahead and help them organize. I'm not trying. Listen, Mo,
we would over at PT Proud.
We want you with us
over here.
Don't get it twisted. We want you with us. But at the same time, if you don't have time to juggle another section, there might be another group.
We can add it. We can add it. Alex, remind me. Hey, Alex, I shouldn't be the only one being invited to become a member.
Yeah. Anyway,
Well,
Alex.
Listen,
Yeah.
He's
Alex,
got
all
to
this
join
stuff
the
requires
APTA
an
again.
a
APTA
bigger
membership, apparently. So we got to start with step one.
But
So
yes,
I do, Alex, I do want to say something because it does make me sad when I hear that people say they're not members of the APTA, and I'm not trying to do a plug for the APTA here, but to change something, you have to be working within it.
Absolutely.
And when
Absolutely.
people step out and check out and say it's not doing anything for me, it's not representing me, and then I'm not a member anymore, then it can never do what you need it to do because you're not there. You're not at the table.
100%.
So I always encourage people, get your membership back and get involved and make the changes. And that's what I keep hoping that we keep doing. And I have seen changes. I mean, PT Proud didn't exist years ago and it exists now. So, we got to change that, be part of that and make that change and make it be what it is. Sitting outside and tapping out, you'll never be
100%. 100%. You're absolutely right. I've kind of taken the approach where for me, it's like the things that I would like to see, I've done trying to do it on a much smaller scale, trying to use this platform and other ways to kind of make the impact that I would like to see. But eventually I may get to that point where, the dollars make sense and that kind of stuff. The other, being completely honest, it's just the monetary value itself, right? It is
expensive. You're right.
It's not the value. Like for me, I've been doing this long enough. I've been involved officially, unofficially, to know there's stuff there. We've had guests who are higher ups in the APTA. We had former APTA president as one of our guests, right?
Great session, by the way.
Yeah, that was a good session.
Thank you. So I know the value is there, but there's the value and then there's the price tag, right? So even though the price is what you pay, value is what you get type of thing, I got a couple mouths to feed and some other stuff we got going on. So, you got to start picking and choosing what makes sense for.
We're going to get to a point where the podcast is going to pay for Alex's membership.
There we go. There we go.
There we go. I think that should be written into his agreement that his membership comes off the top of the podcast. There you go.
I love it.
But anyways, thank you both very much. Really do appreciate you taking the time to be with us tonight. A lot of good information, a lot of good discussion, and hopefully it leads to more discussion, outside of our podcast and into the rooms and the groups that need to be having these conversations.
And I'm a fan of y'all's podcast, so thank you so much for having me on.
Yes, thank you for the invite and happy Pride.
Happy Pride.
All right. Well, as always, thank you, everybody, all our supporters, our fans. Keep liking, subscribe, share, all that good stuff on all our platforms, the Twitter, IG, all that good stuff. As always, everybody have a good evening. And again, be safe. Thank you very much.